I am 48, a wife and mother, desperately searching for the woman I lost somewhere in the domestic routine. When I spot a stray high heel hidden behind the passenger seat of my husband's car, the creeping dread of invisibility sharpens into cold suspicion. I must immediately abandon my passive acceptance and find definitive proof of his betrayal before this secret destroys the foundation of our life and confirms my greatest fear: that I am completely replaceable. But facing the truth requires confronting the forgotten parts of myself and choosing whether to fight for a marriage that may already be dead or finally fight for the life I deserve. It wasn't a sudden realization, not a lightning bolt moment. It was closer to noticing the heat had been turned down gradually, week after week, until you realized you were shivering in your own living room. I hit 48, and the world started seeing through me. I first felt it at work, of course. We were in the quarterly planning meeting, talking projections for Q3. I'd been doing this job for 20 years, the last 7 running this exact department. I threw out a suggestion for the logistics shift, a minor practical change that would save us 30 hours a month in administrative labor. It was solid. It was based on data I personally compiled. The room kept talking. No one registered it. 5 minutes later, Mark, the new guy who is maybe 26, rephrased my exact idea using slightly flashier tech terms. He called it optimizing the flow architecture. Everyone nodded. The CEO looked impressed. "That's a breakthrough idea, Mark. Run with that." I didn't argue. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I just wrote the idea down in my notebook again, using Mark's new, approved language. The exhaustion of having to perform expertise, only to be invisible until a younger voice repeats it, cancels out the outrage. It just becomes another chore. Another calculation you make. Is it worth the energy to demand credit? Or should I just let them execute the good idea and move on? I let them execute. I moved on. That night, I sat at the kitchen island sorting mail. My husband, David, walked in, talking about his own difficult day before he even fully entered the room. He didn't ask about mine. He didn't have to. He just needed a sounding board, a recipient for his noise. He was looking for his gym bag. He asked if I'd seen it. I told him it was right where he always leaves it, next to the laundry basket. He walked straight past it, opened a cupboard, and sighed loudly. Seriously, I can never find anything in this house. I didn't move my eyes from the utility bill. It's next to the laundry basket. David. He turned, saw the black duffel bag instantly and picked it up. Did he apologize for missing it? Did he acknowledge I was right? No. He just said, "Oh, there it is," and left the room, the door closing behind him. The feeling was the same as the meeting. I had provided correct, actionable information, and yet, the source of the information, me, was irrelevant. I was just part of the house infrastructure, like the GPS voice on his phone. Useful, but only as a utility. We've built a life, David and I. 30 years. We raised 2 daughters who are now in college, successfully launched. We hit all the milestones. We paid off the mortgage. We booked the vacations. But somewhere between the high-stakes project proposals and the frantic parent-teacher meetings, I stopped being a participant and became the keeper of the logistics. It's not abuse, it's silence. And the silence is deafening. I walked into the bathroom that night and stood in front of the mirror, the harsh overhead light catching the fine lines around my mouth that weren't there 5 years ago. I wasn't obsessed with youth, but I was obsessed with recognition. I stared hard. Who was looking back? The face was competent, tired. It knew how to run a household, manage a budget, calm a teenage meltdown, and deliver a complex quarterly report. But the person behind the face? The one who used to read poetry late at night and drive too fast listening to loud music? She was gone, subtracted. I realized I hadn't been asked a probing question about my own dreams or internal life in maybe 5 years. Not by my partner, not by my children, not even by my closest friend, who mostly calls to vent about her own marriage. I had become the background noise of my own life. A fixed coordinate on the map that everyone else navigated by, but no one ever stopped to visit. And the horrifying thing about invisibility, the absolute punch to the gut, is that you start to wonder if they're right. Maybe there isn't much left to see. Maybe the person I used to be has been so thoroughly used up by the responsibilities I took on that the core has simply evaporated. You start searching for proof of your own existence. Did I say that out loud? Did I just walk into this room? Does the door remember me closing it? I spent years performing competence, at work, at home, as a mother, as a partner. Now, at 48, I was standing in the wreckage of that performance, holding the accolades, the titles, the successful children, but facing the one question that terrified me. If I stopped performing, would anyone notice I was gone? I turned off the bathroom light. It was easier to disappear in the dark. But the question followed me to bed, lying rigid beside David, who was already snoring softly. Where did I go? The search had just begun, and I knew it wouldn't be easy, because the person I was looking for was the one who had spent decades learning how to hide. David shifted, pulling the duvet tighter, sealing himself into his easy oblivion. I lay there, eyes wide open in the purchased darkness of the blackout blinds, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. It wasn't the sound of peace that bothered me. It was the sound of complete lack of concern. He didn't need to search for himself. David was exactly where he expected to be: successful, comfortable, and served. Our marriage wasn't broken, which was the most terrifying part. Broken things you fix or you throw away. Ours was simply finished developing. It had plateaued into a high-functioning partnership where intimacy was replaced by efficiency. We ran the house, the finances, and the social calendar with the ruthless synchronization of a multinational corporate team. We rarely fought because we rarely disagreed on the logistics, and we never touched the emotional core anymore. It was easier not to. The last time I had expressed a genuine, messy fear, something that had nothing to do with the kids' tuition or the quarterly budget, was probably 8 years ago. I remembered the interaction perfectly. My voice had trembled, and he had responded with a solution, a plan of action, completely missing the need for simple acknowledgement. He had tried to fix my feeling, instead of just sitting in the discomfort with me. I realized then that my vulnerability was an inefficiency in his system. So I learned the script. I filtered my inner life down to actionable items, digestible statistics, or witty anecdotes suitable for dinner parties. The parts that were restless, the parts that were genuinely unsure about the path we were on, those parts I archived deep inside. That archival was the hiding place. That was where the woman I was looking for had retreated. You don't disappear overnight. You disappear in 1,000 tiny withdrawals. You stop saying no to things you dread, because saying yes keeps the peace and costs less energy in the short term. You stop wearing the colors you love because the neutral tones fit the boardroom better. You stop reading the books that make you question things, because questioning things requires energy you need for maintenance. I had spent 20 years perfecting the art of being necessary without being present. I was the lubricant in every mechanism of our life. If the car needed service, I handled it. If the dog needed the vet, I handled it. If the teenagers needed guidance, without judgment, I handled it. If David needed a flawlessly ironed shirt or a thoughtful gift for a business colleague, I handled it. The problem with being the lubricant is that you are only noticed when you run out. Otherwise, you are invisible, essential, but odorless and colorless. I had succeeded so spectacularly at creating a life that required my constant, seamless performance that I had made myself utterly redundant as a human being with individual needs. My identity was purely functional: mother, wife, executive. The moment I mentally stripped those titles away, lying there next to David, I found nothing but cold, dry air. The fear wasn't about aging, though 48 felt like standing on the edge of a visibility cliff. The fear was realizing that I hadn't been an individual entity in my own right for maybe 2 decades. I was the supporting cast in everyone else's story. What if I got up right now, packed a bag, and drove away? David would notice immediately. He'd notice the missing organizational structure. The kids would notice the missing laundry schedule. But would they notice me missing? Or would they just notice the gap in the infrastructure I had created? The answer, delivered by the cold logic of the dark room, was devastatingly clear. They would look for the structure, not the soul. I had been so busy proving my worth through output that I had forgotten to maintain my input. I had starved myself of things that replenished me: solitude that wasn't exhaustion, hobbies that weren't self-improvement projects, friendships that didn't require networking. The search for the lost self, I understood now, wouldn't start with a dramatic change or a grand gesture. It had to start with a complete deconstruction of my daily life, examining every single thing I did and asking, am I doing this because I must, or because I genuinely want to? And the hardest question of all, if I want something that completely disrupts the comfort of the people I love, am I allowed to take it? I reached out and touched David's shoulder. Just a feather touch. He didn't stir. He was miles away, secure in his world, and I realized that the distance between us wasn't geographical. It was the vast, silent acreage I had used to hide myself. It was time to stop hiding. I needed to begin the slow, terrifying process of making noise. I pulled my hand back, carefully, and slipped out of the bed. The house was locked down in the deep hum of midnight sleep. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a violation of the peace I had spent 2 decades meticulously constructing. This silence was my achievement, proof that everything was stable, predictable, and managed. The silence was also suffocating me. I walked down the hall, past the closed doors of the children's rooms. They were adults now, technically, but they still slept here, still existed within the orbit of the routine I maintained. Their lives were the solid, visible structures. I was the silent foundation, the wiring hidden in the walls. I went straight for the car keys hanging by the mudroom door. I didn't need a jacket. I didn't need a reason. The simple, raw necessity was escaping the atmosphere, if only for an hour. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, biting into my exposed arms. I slid into the driver's seat of the SUV, David's car, the safe, sensible family transporter. It felt enormous and impersonal around me. I started the engine, the sudden rumble feeling violently loud in the neighborhood stillness. I backed out of the driveway without turning on the headlights until I reached the corner. A small, childish act of defiance. I drove aimlessly for 15 minutes. The streetlights flashed across my face, revealing and hiding me in quick succession. The freedom wasn't in the speed or the destination. It was in the blessed, absolute lack of obligation. For the first time in memory, no one knew exactly where I was, and no one would need to call me, text me, or ask me for anything. My time was mine, minute by minute. This small rebellion brought with it a crippling wave of guilt. Why did this feel so wrong? Why did claiming 45 minutes of solitude feel like stealing from my family's emotional bank account? I realized that over time, I had internalized the belief that my existence was only justified in service to others. When the service stopped, the guilt started. It was the operating system I ran on. To stop serving was to crash the system. I pulled into the parking lot of a closed industrial park, far from the familiar glow of the main street. I turned off the engine and the lights. Black silence flooded the car. I had spent years perfecting the art of being necessary. I thought necessity equaled visibility. If the house ran smoothly, if the bills were paid on time, if David's shirts were clean, if the kids had clean laundry when they visited, I existed. But necessity, I now understood, was not the same as being seen. It was the definition of being the infrastructure. Nobody notices the plumbing until it breaks. I had been so quiet, so efficient, that I had successfully engineered my own disappearance. I stared out the windshield at nothing. The slow, terrifying process of making noise wasn't about shouting at David or demanding a change in the family dynamic. It was about finding the switch that turned my own light back on, even if the flicker was uncomfortable for everyone else. The first step of the noise was internal. I am allowed to be here, doing nothing, just for myself. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I scrolled through the contacts. I stopped at an old college friend's name, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, someone who knew me before I became the infrastructure, before I became mom or David's wife, before my identity was defined by the roles I fulfilled. The woman on the screen, the number, represented a connection to the person I had shelved. A person who had ambition that was messy, loud, and inconvenient. I hesitated. Calling her at midnight was insane. But the fear of making the call was less potent than the fear of driving back home right now and sliding back into the routine silence, letting the invisibility settle over me again. If I called her, the system would register a fault. I would be prioritizing an unnecessary, purely personal connection over the required readiness for the morning. I would be claiming time that should be spent resting so I could perform better tomorrow. I closed my eyes, took a shallow breath, and hit the call button. It rang once, twice. The sound of the ringing in the silent car felt like the loudest sound I had ever made. It was the first, small crack in the wall, the sound of myself, finally insisting on being heard. It rang a third time, and then the line clicked. Hello? The voice was Sarah's. Slightly hesitant, slightly formal, the way people answer unknown or late-night calls. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. Not since she sent me a birthday text, which I replied to with 3 generic emojis, claiming too much work. Sarah, it's me. A pause. A significant, heavy pause that stretched across the miles and the years of unacknowledged distance. Sarah was the last person who knew the version of me before the machinery took over. Oh, hey. Wow. It's late, isn't it? Are you okay? Her voice immediately dropped the formality, replaced by the instinctual concern of a true witness. I hadn't prepared for the question. I had prepared for the act of calling, but not for the required answer. Am I okay? The question felt ridiculous. Technically, functionally, biologically, yes. My heart was beating. My bills were paid. My performance reviews were excellent. But was I okay? I tried to speak, and nothing came out. My throat tightened, not with sorrow, but with the sheer effort of peeling back the layers of professional control. I was sitting in my expensive, quiet car, safe in my assigned parking spot, unable to utter 2 syllables to a woman who loved me. Are you crying? She asked, her voice softer now, sensing the pressure building. No, I managed, the words sounding like dry sand. No, I'm not crying. I don't know where I am. It was the truth, the core summary of the last decade. I had been optimizing my location, my assets, my health metrics, but I had lost the internal GPS signal entirely. I was 48, and the world had optimized me out of existence. You're lost? She asked gently. No, not lost. That implies I know the destination and missed a turn. I think I'm gone. I think the person who used to operate this body went on permanent leave, and the body just installed a highly functional placeholder. I heard her exhale slowly on the other end. Sarah understood the language of burnout that wasn't about deadlines, but about disappearance. "What happened today?" she prompted. I recounted the drive home. The exhaustion that felt less like fatigue and more like apathy, the moment I realized that if I disappeared tomorrow, the system would hiccup for a week and then seamlessly replace the function I provided. No one would mourn me. They would inconvenience themselves over the sudden lack of organization. I stood in the kitchen tonight, Sarah, staring at the mail pile, and I realized that for years, I have only done things that are required or that will result in a measurable gain. I stopped doing things that were just mine. Not strategic, not productive, just quiet, personal noise. I quit reading the long, stupid novels I used to love because I couldn't justify the 3 hours of non-output. I stopped calling you because it wasn't a task. It was optional, and optional things felt selfish. The word hung there, selfish. The ultimate crime in the religion of relentless performance. "And now?" she asked. "Now, I am terrified that if I try to find that person, the one who read the stupid novels and laughed too loud, she might not be there anymore. I'm afraid the performance has become the reality, that I've become so good at being the function, I can't remember how to be the self." It wasn't a cry for help. It was a detached observation of a total structural failure. It wasn't despair. It was the cold clarity of intellectual realization. "You sound like you're describing a stranger," Sarah observed. She is. She is a stranger who answers to my name and pays my mortgage." The conversation shifted then. It moved away from the deep philosophical void and became immediate, human, and practical. Sarah didn't offer platitudes about finding myself or needing a vacation. She knew that midlife exhaustion isn't fixed by a week on a beach. It's fixed by micro-revolutions. "You're coming for coffee tomorrow morning," she stated, not asked. "Before work. I don't care about your schedule. I don't care about your commute time. You're meeting me at the corner bakery, 7 o'clock. You're going to sit down, and you're going to order something ridiculous and unnecessary. Something that provides zero nutritional benefit or professional networking opportunity. And we're going to talk about the stupid novels. Can you do that?" I could feel the pressure lifting slightly, replaced by the unfamiliar weight of accountability to a purely personal demand. It was a mandatory appointment, but for the soul, not the ledger. 7, I confirmed, my voice steadier now. "Good. Now go home. And when you get there, don't look at the mail pile. Look at the mirror. And say your name. Out loud. Say it until it sounds like you again." We hung up. The silence returned to the car, but it was a different kind of silence. It was no longer the suffocating quiet of self-imprisonment, but the fragile quiet following a controlled demolition. I put the phone down, my hand slightly shaking. I had spent 15 minutes claiming space. 15 minutes insisting that the person inside the machine still mattered enough to risk the next day's performance metric. I started the engine. The drive home felt suddenly urgent. Not because I was late for bed, but because I had an assignment. A ridiculous, unnecessary, profoundly important assignment. I had to look in the mirror and hear my own name, spoken by my own voice. I had to find the function's operator before the placeholder claimed the title permanently. I parked the car in the garage. The silence swallowed the engine noise immediately, a deep, padded quiet that always felt more isolating than the loudest city street. I walked into the house, navigating the dim hallway not by sight, but by memory. The exact placement of the coat rack, the slight squeak in the third stair. This house, built meticulously for 2 lives to mesh, often felt like a highly optimized storage facility for one. I didn't check the bedroom. I didn't want the accidental interruption, the mumbled, sleepy query, that would force me back into the role of partner, of co-tenant, before I had finished the assignment. The urgency from the car ride hadn't faded. It had condensed into a tight knot of focused anxiety. The bathroom. I flipped the vanity lights on. They were the harsh, unforgiving kind, designed for applying makeup or shaving, revealing every flaw and shadow, stripping away any cinematic softness. I leaned closer to the glass. There I was, 48 years old, staring back. The face was familiar, obviously, yet the person operating the features felt utterly alien. I noticed the fine lines around the eyes. Yes, but those were just mileage markers. What terrified me was the flatness of the expression, the complete neutrality of the gaze. My eyes weren't reflective. They were purely analytical, calculating the buffer time needed for the morning commute, already prioritizing the day's tasks. There was no me in there, just the highly efficient functions operator, running the systems until shutdown. I closed my eyes, took a shaky breath, and then opened them again. I had to look past the functionality. I had to locate the human. I tried to say my name. The first attempt failed. My throat tightened. It felt absurd, like a character in a play reciting lines they hadn't learned properly. The name felt too big, too important, belonging to someone who was allowed to make noise, to take up unexpected space, to have desires that weren't tied to optimization metrics. I tried again, pushing the sound out. It was a dry, ragged whisper. You. The reflection didn't flinch. It didn't react with recognition or warmth. It simply remained, a portrait of operational exhaustion. The profound truth of my invisibility wasn't that others couldn't see me. It was that I hadn't looked at myself honestly in a decade. I had outsourced my identity to my duties: wife, mother, when they were younger, manager, efficient consumer. The original operator had gone on long-term leave, and the placeholder, good at maintenance but terrible at passion, had assumed control permanently. I stood there for perhaps 5 minutes, locked in a silent, static battle with my own reflection. I couldn't connect the name to the face. The connection was severed, rusted shut by years of focusing on external demands. The assignment was harder than I thought. A name wasn't enough. I needed proof that the old me, the loud, visible, flawed me, had ever existed outside of the current metrics. I stepped back from the mirror and moved toward the spare room, which was now the dedicated home office, a space dedicated entirely to utility, filled with filing cabinets and a standing desk. I went straight to the closet. Tucked behind stacks of old tax documents and bundled cables was a small, dusty cardboard box labeled simply, Archives. I pulled it down, the tape crackling as I broke the seal. Inside were the tangible remnants of the operator before the system overhaul. Concert ticket stubs, a faded photo of me and my best friend laughing hysterically in a cheap rental car 25 years ago, and underneath it all, the journal. It was a cheap, black composition notebook from college, fat and warped, held together by sheer willpower and the adhesive failing on the spine. I hadn't touched it since I got married. It contained terrible poetry, impossible 5-year plans, and a manic certainty that the world was waiting for whatever I decided to do next. I opened it randomly. The handwriting was aggressive, slanted, almost angry in its enthusiasm. I skimmed a paragraph about quitting a terrible summer job and moving to a city I'd only seen in a movie. I read the text, and for the first time since I left the car, I felt a flicker of heat behind my eyes. Not sadness, exactly, but recognition. This writer, this person who took risks and declared intentions in all caps, was not an efficient placeholder. She was messy, disruptive, and entirely visible. I closed the journal, holding the cheap notebook like it was a relic of immense value. The person who wrote this existed, and if she existed then, her remnants had to be somewhere in the current model. I walked back, into the bathroom, journal in hand, and faced the mirror again. The light still harsh. "I know you're in here," I said, my voice louder this time, directed at the tired eyes. "I just found the minutes from the previous session. We're going to start talking." The silent frustration of the parking lot had finally found an anchor. It wasn't about quitting the job or leaving the life. It was about firing the placeholder and putting the demanding, messy, visible operator back in the driver's seat of her own existence. I had just found my first piece of evidence. The search for meaning wasn't out there. It was buried under bills and optimized schedules, waiting to be unearthed. The evidence was buried deep, not in an old diary, but in the specific, heavy absence of things. The placeholder version of me had been ruthlessly efficient, clearing out anything that didn't serve the current structure, bills, schedules, and the general welfare of the household. She had been a great COO of the family unit, but the real me, the demanding operator, had left behind specific ghosts. I found one in the dusty corner of the basement closet, behind the winter tires and a broken humidifier. It was my old painting easel, not the small portable one for quick sketches, but the serious heavy wooden one I'd inherited from my grandfather. I hadn't touched it in 12 years. 12 years of making sure the walls were painted neutral colors. 12 years of making sure the floors were clean. 12 years of telling myself I didn't have the space, the time, or the right to make a deliberate, beautiful mess. The moment I dragged it out, the dust motes dancing in the meager light, I realized the full cost of optimization. We spend our 40s perfecting the infrastructure of life. The mortgage, the retirement funds, the health insurance, and in the process, we optimize ourselves right out of existence. We become the lubricant that keeps the machine running silently. And silence, I understood now, was the breeding ground for invisibility. I sat on the cold concrete floor, tracing the old paint streaks on the wood. They were bright, defiant colors. Deep cobalt, thick crimson. The colors of a person who didn't care if her clothes got stained. The colors of a person who wasn't trying to match the sofa. This was the first hurdle. Acknowledging that the placeholder had been more convenient for everyone else, including the operator herself. The operator was noisy. She was demanding. She required space, light, and uninterrupted blocks of time. The placeholder simply folded laundry and answered emails. She was easy to manage. The real fight wasn't against the world, or against my husband, or against the teenagers who only saw me as a vending machine with rules. The fight was against the sheer gravitational pull of convenience. I started small. I didn't announce I was quitting my job or filing for separation. I simply stopped being available at 6 a.m. That used to be my buffer zone, the time I prepared the coffee, packed the lunch boxes, and mentally reviewed the day's obligations. The first morning, I simply took the easel out of the basement, dragged it to the sunniest corner of the dining room, a spot previously reserved for holiday overflow, and left it there. It was an act of aggression against the neatness I had maintained for so long. It ruined the sightline from the kitchen. It was disruptive. My husband noticed. Not immediately, but when he went to set down his briefcase, he looked at the easel like it was a small, dangerous animal. "What is this?" he asked, not angrily, but with the flat confusion reserved for something that simply does not compute in the established order. "It's the easel," I said. He waited for the rest of the explanation. Where it was going, why it was out, when it would be put away. "I'm going to use it," I added. He looked at the clock, then at the easel, then back at me. "When?" "You have the meeting at 9. That's how deep the placeholder had dug in. My time was not my own. It was measured against the next external obligation. The idea that I might use time simply because I needed to create something messy and non-essential was foreign. "I'll figure it out," I told him. and I realized that was the second piece of evidence I needed. The operator was not asking for permission, and she was done explaining the value of her own existence. The next morning, I woke up at 5. I didn't creep around. I made coffee. For one, not the whole pot. I put on the old, stained sweatshirt that smelled faintly of turpentine and didn't care that my hair was a mess. I sat down in front of the easel. I didn't try to paint anything good. I just started spreading color onto the canvas. Violent greens, heavy yellows. It felt physically uncomfortable, like grinding rusty gears back into motion. The hand felt stiff. The eye felt critical. The internal voice, the one that used to scream about ambition, had become a tiny, critical whisper about wasted time. But I kept moving the brush. For 45 minutes, I was just a source of friction, pushing back against the smoothness of my highly optimized life. When I heard the first footsteps upstairs, signaling the start of the daily rush, I didn't jump up to meet the schedule. I took 5 more minutes. I finished the harsh, ugly patch of orange I was working on. When I finally stood up, my neck was tight and my hands were stained. I hadn't made art. I had made a statement. The invisible woman had just claimed territory. The hard part wasn't starting the painting. The hard part was knowing that the rest of the day, the meetings, the errands, the cooking, would try to erase those 45 minutes of defiant visibility, proving that the real self was just a fleeting, self-indulgent hobby, easily folded back into the routine. But now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw the paint on my face. And for the first time in years, I saw a trace of the operator looking back. She looked tired, messy, and ready to fight for the space she needed. The placeholder was officially on notice. But she was not defeated. She held considerable power, rooted in inertia, and, crucially, in the comfort of everyone else. My invisibility was the smooth, silent oil that kept their gears turning. The moment I started demanding my own space, the minute I refused to be the default organizer, the immediate fixer, the silent absorber of domestic chaos, that system would seize up. And that was the true exhaustion of life at 48, the continuous, exhausting labor of maintaining the illusion that the placeholder was happy, that her endless sacrifice was effortless, and that she didn't exist primarily to manage the happiness and needs of others. 45 minutes of defiant visibility was nothing against 2 decades of habit. The fight was not about leaving a job or burning down the house. It was about the small, daily, agonizing choices that caused friction. It was about allowing things to be inconvenient for the people around me. That was the terrifying part. When you have spent so long being the solution, becoming a temporary problem, even a necessary one, feels like a betrayal. I had to learn to accept the annoyed sighs, the confused looks, and the temporary disarray that would erupt when I prioritized my own sanity over their immediate needs. They would look for the placeholder, the one who absorbed the mess before it touched them, and find only the operator, tired and unapologetic, drawing a boundary with a shaky, painted hand. I had been trained to believe that peace was the absence of conflict. Now, I understood that the peace I craved was the result of a profound internal conflict that I had, for too long, suppressed. The true cost of my silence was the loss of the self who knew how to speak up, how to be messy, how to simply be without managing the perceptions of her existence. Invisibility wasn't just about not being seen by the world. It was about the active, internal decision to make, oneself small enough not to rock the boat. It was the choice to avoid the specific gravity of being a difficult, complex, demanding human being. I had polished my edges down until I was a smooth, functional riverstone, easy to handle and easy to ignore. The paint, the mess I made on my face, was a deliberate attempt to put the grit back. The realization hit me harder than any physical tiredness. I didn't lose myself. I surrendered her, piece by silent peace, because the path of least resistance was always the path where I asked for nothing. The operator had to get back to work. The first task was simple: identifying the non-negotiables. Not the vacation, not the big project, but the tiny slivers of time that belonged only to her. The 45 minutes of morning light, the books that demanded concentration, the specific type of music that required headphones, things that signaled, I am occupied, and this occupation is non-transferable. This was not selfishness. It was the establishment of spiritual reserves. I looked at the mirror again. The trace of paint was still there, a small, stubborn banner. It wasn't beautiful in the societal sense. It was aggressive. It was the color of refusal. The world out there, the world that demands efficiency and quiet compliance from women approaching 50, would not suddenly grant me visibility just because I willed it. Visibility had to be taken. It had to be demanded through action, through disappointing someone, through saying no when yes was expected, through allowing the plates to sit unwashed while I finished a chapter. This wouldn't be a fast revolution. It would be a slow, grinding war of attrition against the placeholder's legacy. There would be days when I slipped back, when the fatigue was too heavy, and it was easier to be the smooth stone again. But those days would now be tracked, counted as setbacks, not defaults. The hardest part of this entire journey wasn't finding out where the operator had gone. It was accepting that she was exhausted, damaged, and thoroughly inconvenienced by her own return. She needed care, not just deployment. But she was here. She was messy. She was tired. She was refusing to clean up this particular internal mess anymore. That refusal, that willingness to let the dust settle where it may, both internally and externally, was the single greatest act of defiance I had left. I wasn't looking to be seen by everyone. I was just finally, fiercely, looking to be seen by the only person whose vision truly mattered. I decided that day that if I was going to be invisible to the world, I would at least be undeniably present to myself. The placeholder was dead, and the operator was back in the chair, ready to fight for the space she needed, even if it meant making noise, leaving dirt, and accepting the discomfort that always accompanies true self-reclamation.